All right, so for this video, what we're going to be doing is really focusing in on just one area of our page here, and that area is the download resume button. Okay, so we're really going to just be focusing on like building that out. So there's a bit of HTML and a little bit more CSS that we're going to write that includes what's called the box model that the instructional materials talk about. Okay, so we'll kind of actually put that into action. What you'll notice is download resume. So it's got that actionable CTA on it. And when we hover over it, there's an effect. Okay, so this is really where you want to try to figure out like what you want it to look like and then describe it out loud. And then we're going to write the styles for it. Okay, so it's going to have a button that has an outline and it's going to say download resume in all caps in this particular font. And then when you hover over it, it reverses itself. Background turns to black and the text turns to white. Okay, we're going to kind of ignore this little icon for now. You do that stuff in Module 3, but that's what we want it to look like. Now, there's a couple things we need to have happen before we can actually, have it actually do anything. Right now, if I just click on it, nothing really happens, right? It just goes to the top of the page. We need to actually have a resume as a PDF that it'll actually download. Okay, now this kind of opens up a little bit more of a conversation that's bigger than this actual video, but you need to create a resume and save it as a PDF. Now, if you don't have one or if you've given no thought to that, this is the opportunity to kind of build out your first resume and really start down that path. So you can come find one of us and we're happy to kind of help you through that. But a really good resource that I'd recommend taking a look at sooner than later is Career Services. There's a whole area on campus devoted to helping you find careers and building out stuff. And obviously faculty will help you do that specific to your major. But Career Services kind of help you build out some of these bits and pieces. You can go over there and they can talk all about it, but what I'd recommend is going to their website and under favorites, they have a career guideline for UNL majors and it lists all the majors. So if you click on, I teach in advertising public relations. So if you click on that, you get employers from past alum, future education that you can kind of continue on, internships that people have gotten. Now it's not all of them, but you can kind of get a sense of, what people have done with this particular major. So I would check that out just because you can kind of get a sense of the breadth of what you can work on and may give you some ideas moving forward. And then specific to resumes, there's a whole section on resumes that is worth taking a look at. Tips to kind of putting it together. This resume worksheet's pretty cool, so I'd recommend looking at that. Essentially, we're going to be doing the same thing here. This links to a PDF when you actually click on it. So this is what we're going to be doing on our site. Okay, so Career Services, check that out. That's worth taking a look at. But for now, we're going to jump into brackets and actually build out this. Okay, now, once you have the resume, what we do need to have happen is you need to save that PDF inside of your images folder that we've been working on. Okay, you need to save it with your last name and then a date. What I like to do when I name files with a date is the month, day, and year. And you got to be thinking about like what happens when somebody clicks on the button, especially for PDF. They're actually clicking on a file and it's going to open up that file name. And if they download it, they're going to see that file name. So if it just says like untitled document or just resume, and they're downloading lots of resumes or they have a whole folder of resumes, yours isn't going to necessarily stand out. So get in a habit of like naming your files correctly. Like I said, I like to put dates on it, but for this project, you do need to have your last name with the date of your PDF of your resume. So we have to have it inside of our images folder to be able to use. So make sure you do that. Okay. So all right, so what we need to do is actually go into our HTML and put the button in there where we need it. So what we're going to do is we are going to add a paragraph underneath our image of ourselves here inside the aside. Okay, so what we need to do is just put a paragraph, and then on that paragraph, we're actually going to add an attribute of class, and we're going to call it button. Okay, and we're going to use that in a sec here. Next, inside that paragraph, we're going to add an a href equals quotes, and we're just going to put a hashtag in there for now. We're going to come back, but that's where we're going to link our image. And then we're going to put download resume as like the call to action, right? It's an actionable thing. When you click on this, you will download my resume kind of thing. Okay, so we need to go back here and actually link this the way we need it to, right? So we're going to go inside here and we need to link it to the PDF that we have saved inside of our images folder. Now again, this is relative, so we are working on our home page here, and then we need to go inside of images and then get our PDF. So if we do that, start typing in images and then grab our PDF, we should be good. And what we're going to do is we're going to save this and go test it out and then just see what it actually looks like and make sure it actually works, right? So what we've been doing here is we have this link. When we click on it, it goes to our PDF and it works. So we know it works inside of our HTML, so we're good there. So now we can kind of switch over to our CSS and really dive into how we want it to look, right? So this is where we're going to make a button look clickable, look like something that people can interact with. So after, what we're going to do is put it after our links that we created, and what we're going to do is we're going to select the button, so the class button, and inside of the paragraph that has the class button on it, we are going to select the link. Okay, we're going to open and close that, and we're going to put our styles in here. Okay, now this is where we can kind of think out loud, like how we want this to look, right? The box, the hover, the everything that we want to build out. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the actual color of the text, because that's pretty easy, right? So we're going to have the color be 3/6, right? And then we're going to have the text aligned to the center. And then we're going to tell the text decoration to be none, just to make sure there's no underline there. All right. So when we have all that stuff there, we can kind of save this and check this out and make sure it's doing what we want it to do, right? So now it just looks like regular text, and that's okay, but let's add the border and let's get some of this stuff going the way we need it to. All right, so when we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to add a border, and here's where there's a little bit of shorthand here. We're going to pick the color, the same color as the text, and we're going to have a space, and then we're going to tell it how thick we want the border to be, so in this case thin, and then what type of style the border should have, so solid. Okay. And then the last thing, or the last couple things we're going to add here are more just styles that we can build. But the one that's kind of interesting is called display, and we're going to use this later in when we use something called Flexbox. But we are going to say the display is going to be block, right? And let's save this and kind of check out what we got going here, right? So that display block kind of takes up the width of the browser instead of just the content. And what you'll notice is instead of just being able to hover over the text, I can hover over the box itself, right? So it becomes a block. And that functions much more like a button on the web. The other thing you also notice is that border around things as well. Last thing we're going to add is just some padding to make sure it looks good on the top and the bottom, so that way there's some space and looks more like a button. So we're going to jump in here and add some padding. So we're going to add padding of 10 pixels, and you can have it be whatever you want, but if we take a look at that, that's kind of what I was using, but you decide how big you want it. But we added some space in the top and the bottom, and technically added to the left and the right. So that's all four sides of the box that we're affecting there. Okay, so we got something that's looking pretty good for our button, but we want to add that hover effect. Okay, so we're going to add another style, and we're going to call it button. A and hover and set up. So here's where we want to think about what happens when they hover it and what's going to change, because this is going to overwrite those, just like what we did with the links for the text, the regular text. Okay? So we know we want the color to change, and we want that to change to white. So it kind of reverses. And we know we want the background color to change to black. Now here's where you can kind of pick colors that you want to have based on your style and the way you want it to look. The last thing we're going to do is tell the border to change as well. Now again, you can kind of have this do what you want, but I'm going to tell the border to go to black and still keep the thin, oops, sorry, we need 3 zeros, still keep the thin and solid there, so that way it doesn't like shift things in any weird way. Okay, so let's take a look and see what we got here. There's a couple things we need to finish, but we have a button that hovers and does what we want it to, and that's looking pretty cool. And now keep in mind, this is the color of the text, not the background color. This is the color of the font or the text. I'm going to change it to 3 6s, and then we're going to add something called text align, and we're going to center it, right, because we want it in the middle of the button. And then we're going to tell the text decoration to be none, and that should sound familiar. And then we're going to add something called display block. And I'm going to come back to that here in a sec. Okay? So we got the gist of it. So let's save this and like kind of jump over and kind of see, you know, what we got going in the preview here, right? So we have something that's centered and it's changed colors, right? And the block part allows the whole entire box. It's centered in this whole web browser, and we're going to change that as we get later down the road here. So what the block does is it allows you, instead of just having to hover over the text, it allows, you see I'm kind of hovering over here, it allows you to hover over the entire box that is created from that paragraph, the class button, and the A. It allows that whole area to be clickable. You kind of see that change the icon there. Okay, so that's what display block does. All right, so we're going to add a couple more things. So this next part is really incorporating everything about the box model, right? And so the CSS box model, like, it's the next level of CSS, but beyond just the basics that we've done to this point. This is really when you get into be able to control what this page and what these elements start to look like, because it allows you to add space and a little bit of styling specific to elements, right? So the interior box is the content itself, and in between the border is the padding, and outside the border is the margin, right? And we can actually use those. And this is where I'd recommend doing the Code Academy tutorials when it talks about spacing elements. It'll go through the box model in more depth that's worth checking out. Okay, so for us, what we're going to be doing is we want to add some padding, right? And we're going to add 10 pixels all around. So that is, when you see one number, it's top, right, bottom, and left. So all 4 sides of the box. Okay, and then what we're going to do is add a border. And this is where it gets into shorthand. You can write these out in individual, but you see this. So we want the color of the text to be the same as the border of the button. So we're going to do 3 6s, a space, so that's the color of the border. Thin is the style, or the weight, sorry, the width of the border. And then solid is the style of the line it's going to use. Okay, so if we save this and jump back into our preview, we get that gray border, right? So now you can really see the box. So when I hover over here, you can see that it's clickable over here. So I can click here and go to my PDF, right? So that's what we're working on here. So we have it pretty much the way we want it to. This is what we want it to look like, and that's cool. So now we need to add those hover effects, right? There's no hover effect when you go over the button, okay? So this is where instead of just an A, we need to add a pseudo class like we did above. And then we are going to say, copy and paste that, and we're going to say on hover, what do we want it to look like? Okay, so this is where, like, saying it out loud, like, what do we want this thing to look like? So we want the color to change, right? We want the color to change to white. We don't really care about this stuff here, so we're going to delete this because we don't want that to change. We want the border to change to white, right? So we want it to match the color itself. All right, and then what we want to do is change the background color of that box, of that area, and we want to change it to black, right? And that's 3 zeros, right? So this is where you can pick out like colors and that sort of thing at this point. to figure out what you want it to look like. So when we refresh this, when we hover over it, you notice that we got a hover effect going on. Okay. Now the thing you should notice is we got like this purple or the blue kind of the link going on here, and we want to kind of change that. Okay. So the last thing we need to do is add something that's called visited. Okay. So we're going to copy on the first button link that we have. We're going to copy that selector, add a comma, paste it, and we're going to say visited, spell it right, and visited, right? So by default, when you click on links, you get a visited state, and a lot of times it's just purple. Now we kind of ignored that for other links, but for now we're going to do this on the button so it actually looks correct. So when we do this and hit refresh, you see we go back to the gray, and when we hover over it, we get our black hover effect, and you see that the text changes to white. Okay, so that in of itself is really getting at a sense of how we can start to build out what are called UI elements, right? And the text talks about this. So user interface elements to really make something look clickable beyond just our regular text links, right? And we're going to do this in the next video, is build out the top part of our header, kind of similar to what we did here. We're going to build it out to make it look more like a website and